The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
My guest right now is Commander Mike Zullo, Lieutenant Mike Zullo, who works for the he answers only to Sheriff Joe Arpaio, America's toughest sheriff, the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, in particularly in this investigation of this fraudulent birth certificate, the only identifying document that Barack Obama has ever proffered to the nation. Mike Zullo, are you with us?
I am, Carl. How are you, brother?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for being on the show. What we're going to do is a cleanup here, and I'm going to let you do the vast majority of the talking. I'll set it up, and then I'm going to turn it over to you, because you and I were on the Peter Boyle show this morning out of Denver, KNUS. The reason we were, and most folks listening to this segment know exactly what's going on, but of course we get new listeners all the time, and some people who don't know this story, and this is important. What you're going to hear Mike Zullo say is really, really important concerning what he's doing and this upcoming conference that wherein all of his information is going to be revealed to the world. And it's astounding. The word we have used is earth-shattering and universe-shattering, etc. But the bottom line is, I had been listening to Peter Boyle's show, or portions of it, and listening to this plethora of people coming on, speculating about the case and speculating about what they were calling evidence. Colonel Lawrence Sellin retired. He was coming on doing that. A guy named Brian Riley, Mike Zullo will tell you all about Brian Riley, coming on speculating, other people. And that's cool. And talk radio, you can speculate all you want, but the problem is they were getting over into the areas of making definitive statements and calling it evidence. So I emailed Peter Boyles and said, look, here's who I am. I talk to Mike Zullo every day. Would you like me to come on and give you the information I can give you? And it's factual information. Well, anyway, some rigmarole. It took a couple of weeks. I finally went on the show. He was going to have me on for 15 minutes. He kept me on for an hour, and then invited me back. That was on a Friday. Invited me back for the next Tuesday show. That first show was fairly cordial. Near the end, he got a little snippety about I had been on for 45 minutes and hadn't told him anything, although I did reveal 2 brand new pieces of information that Mike Zullo gave me permission to reveal. Plus 3 times during that hour, I offered to give him some exclusive information for his audience only, and he never asked me for it. So I was smelling a rat. I knew something was up. But when I came on the show the next Tuesday, he had set up an ambush with Colonel Peter Sellins, who's kind of seems to be a self-promoting kind of guy, in my humble opinion, on this whole thing. Knows very little of real evidence, but yet claims he's on the inside scoop, and even invokes Mike Zullo's name from time to time. And so when I went on the show, we started right off, and I started off explaining several points where they were just extremely and terribly wrong. The problem is from that point forward, they just double-teamed, trashed me, tried to shut me down, overtalk me, filibuster, etc., until Peter Boyles finally just cut me off the air, which I knew was going to happen. I told Mike Zullo before I went on, I said, they're going to cut me off the air. That's what they're going to do. They're not going to be able to handle the truth. But the problem is, folks, is that Peter Boyles said on one of his shows to a caller, and many of you have watched this video, he said, Carl Gallup said that Mike Zullo said that John Brennan, who's the CIA director, is the forger of the Obama birth certificate. And the caller said, quote, oh my God, that is earth-shattering. And Peter Boyle said, yeah, but. Well, here's the problem. I have never said that. Neither has Zullo ever said that. Neither has Arpaio ever said that. I called Mike Zullo. I said, Mike, where are they getting this from? Have you ever said that? He said, not only have I never said it, but as far as I know, John Brennan's not the forger. He said, I know who forged it. I said, well, that's what I thought. So folks, that's some pretty heavy-duty radio, legal, liable stuff. I mean, I can't get on the air and say, Mike Zullo said, when he never said that, without cleaning that up. So the bottom line is, some emails were sent to the station, the legal department from Zullo, Maricopa County, etc., saying, look, you got to clean this up. So Boyles gets on the phone with Zullo and says, hey, I'm going to have Carl and you, Mike, I'm going to have you on. I'm going to apologize to Carl for the way I treated him. We're going to clean up that whole John Brennan thing. I got to get this right. Zullo says, fine. So Mike and I went on the show this morning. We had what I'm going to say, Mike, a cordial conversation with him, about 20 minutes, but he never apologized, and he never even mentioned the John Brennan, the legal point, the libelous point. He never even mentioned it. All right, that's the setup. Mike, I'm going to turn it over to you because there's a lot of stuff with this Brian Riley and everything I just said and what is evidence and what's not and the whole bit. Now you get the rest of the time, Mike.
Well, Carl, I thought today was actually a meaningless interview. I knew right from the beginning when he introduced me on the air, you don't have to give me any kudos, but you certainly do the man I work for.
Right.
And he introduced me on the air like I was just some other guy, like a Lawrence Sellin. As a matter of fact, he gave Lawrence Sellin more honor than he did me and Sheriff Arpaio by the way of introduction. He just introduced me as by name, never made any reference, actually just asked me, how did you get involved?
Right.
As if you don't know.
Right.
You've only been following this, according to you, 5 years, pounding the pavement for 5 years, and you don't know. So I knew the setup was there right from the beginning. It was more of an interview of him, I believe, not wanting to humble himself and say, hey, I made a mistake.
Right.
Forgive me. It was, let's see if I can gloss this over and give the impression that we're all singing Kumbaya.
Right. Well, he basically said that. He said, what did he say? He said, I recently had a show, I wasn't proud of how it sounded. Well, that could mean several things. It could mean I didn't like the way Gallup sounded. I wasn't proud of it. And then he said, but we're all on the same page here, and I just want to make that clear. Well, that's not an apology, and you and I are not on the same page with him in everything, and he never dealt with the John Brennan legality, the potentially liable situation.
Well, I mean, that comment that he made, that he had the inability to recall making only 45 minutes earlier, was, to me, almost devastating. First of all, I would never publicly go out there and make an accusation like that. That would be done from the Sheriff of Maricopa County. I'm going to tell you straight up, that never occurred. He is not involved that we know of, and we would never say anything of the sort.
Right.
So that kind of information he got, because the show is really what it is. It's a bunch of guys sitting around a table that should be wearing house dresses, put their hair up in curlers, and eating bonbons.
Right. And speculating.
Table.
Yeah, and speculating.
Table. Right. Exactly. It's pure speculation. There is nothing new under the sun on his show for the past 2 years.
Right.
And the other amazing thing to me is if he truly was what he represents as someone who is on top of this and fighting for this, I've never gotten a call from him in 2 years asking me to go back on his radio show.
Right, right.
Never even a call to say, hey, could you tell me what's going on?
Right.
Nothing.
And one of the things that he did when I was on the show, he continually questioned my connection to you as though I were just lying when I said, look, I talk to Zulo almost every day. And sometimes it's for 10 minutes, sometimes it's for an hour. And then, no, you don't. Who are you? What are you? That kind of stuff.
Well, Carl, I personally, I have a couple of different views on this. Some, we'll talk about privately. But I think he has an issue with you as an issue of your occupation.
Yeah.
I think he has an issue with your belief.
That may be.
And I think he just really wants to prove you to be a liar.
Right.
And I think that was pretty evident, too, with his second guest that he had on, Brian Riley. I mean, there's a whole backstory to Brian Riley.
Well, tell us the backstory.
Well, Brian Riley was on the board of the Surprise Tea Party when they came to Sheriff Arpaio and asked him to look into this. Brian Riley had the idea to bring Jerry Corsi. That's Brian Riley's claim to fame and only claim to fame in this whole episode. Mr. Riley, though, has a unique ability. He can't get along with anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Riley was a very destructive, divisive force in the Tea Party. We were getting complaints. My phone was ringing from them, not knowing what to do with him. And they were at a point where I understood they were having a meeting because they wanted to remove him from the board and fire him from the board. Mr. Riley is also a self-described political activist. Really, he's more just of an agitator. At that point, Mr. Riley was also firing off letters to representatives and county attorneys and all kinds of nonsense with this. And he was becoming a bit of a threat, in a way, to the investigation. So I wish in hindsight, I never made this call. I was advised against it by Chief Brian Sands, but I did it anyway.
That's Chief Sands with the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, right?
Correct.
Okay.
I decided that what I wanted to do was neutralize Mr. Riley, put Mr. Riley in a cardboard box, if you will, and put him off to the side. So what I advocated to do was to make him a member of us, of our organization, keep him at the most basic level where he can't really do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And in return, have him voluntarily surrender his boardship. That way it stops the destruction of that organization and cease his political activity.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're dealing with us now and you're part of us and we're in this investigation, you can't, by our policies, engage in those activities.
Right.
That's what happened. In my mind, I thought I can keep this guy under control. So I gave him busy work to do. There is nothing of any significant value that Brian Riley ever contributed to this investigation.
Right.
There is no information that Brian Riley gave that's ever been utilized to any extent in this investigation. Mr. Riley did accompany me on a couple trips I had to make out of state, where I elected to drive rather than fly for TSA reasons. And he did accompany me to those, but those were innocuous.
Right.
So there was nothing I had to worry about. So I selected what Mr. Riley was going to get. As a matter of fact, Mr. Riley was on some internet talk show, and he even said that he was kept in the dark.
Right.
And he was.
But he appears on Peter Boyle's show as some kind of an expert, and Peter treats him that way, as some kind of an expert, basically exalting Riley, who knows nothing, and trashing you and trashing me and those of us who do know what's going on.
You know, the only thing I could say is it was like this was the second coming.
No.
I mean, he walked on the scene and this guy was bowing down to him, lapping up everything that he was saying. This man was not vetted at all.
Right.
There's another instance with Mr. Riley that was very, very peculiar.
Mm-hmm.
We have an application process that you have to go through.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I was corresponding with Mr. Riley for a year while he was the Surprise Tea Party.
Mm-hmm.
And in that time, you know, you have a lot of conversations with people. You talk about what you did for a living, all that stuff. Well, when it came down for him to surrender his application, he calls me up. He says, "Hey, I have to talk to you." Well, when you get that call, you know it's not good.
Right.
I said, "Look, I don't really have a time to meet you. Tell me what you need to tell me and fax over the application." He proceeds to tell me that he was a reserve police officer in a county, in a town around the Seattle, Washington area, I believe in the early 90s, and was terminated from that position.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he kept this a secret from me for a year. He has still kept that a secret from the public, and you have to ask yourself why.
Right. Well,
now, there is a bigger story here. I'm just not going to say it yet.
Okay.
But it's a dirtier story.
I know, and I know some of it. Let me ask you this. We got to take a break. Are you at liberty to say what Peter Boyle said about Brian Riley as far as, you know, feeling kind of duped by the whole thing? Are you at liberty to talk about that? And I thought Boyles was supposed to address that this morning.
Well, Peter Boyles told me that he believed that Mr. Riley was an internet stalker. He admitted to me that he didn't vet the guy. He told me that he got set up. He told me that it was an OBOT setup.
Right.
I mean, these are all the things the guy's telling me before we're going to go on his radio show.
Right.
And I said to him, I said, "Look, if you make this right, I'm willing to let bygones be bygones. But this guy Riley was slanderous, defamatory, you name it, he was."
Right.
So that was supposed to take place on that interview today, and none of that happened.
Surprise, surprise. Hey, Mike, let's take a quick time out so we'll have time on the other side, because I still want to address this John Brennan thing and what was said and who said it and why this is so potentially big legally. And he had a chance, Boyles had a chance to clean it all up this morning, and he never mentioned it. Folks, you're listening to Freedom Friday. My guest this afternoon, Lieutenant Mike Zullo, works right under Sheriff Joe Arpaio on the Obama fraud case. We'll be right back after this timeout. All right, welcome back, Gulf Coast. Welcome back, America. So glad you're with us this afternoon. My guest is Lieutenant Mike Zullo with Maricopa County Sheriff's Office Obama Fraud Investigation Cold Case Posse Commander. Mike Zullo, listen, I've got several things I want to hit, but first, we left talking about Brian Riley, this guy that was on the Cold Case Posse for a while, but was just causing all kinds of havoc.
8 weeks, Charles, he was on.
I'm sorry.
8 weeks.
Do what?
8 weeks, a big 8 weeks.
8 weeks. But then, Didn't he kind of find out that you were getting ready to fire him, and what happened from there?
Well, he started to have these same kind of relational issues as he was going through his basic training. And he leveled some accusations against the training instructor that I personally had to investigate now for 20 hours. And when push came to shove, I had Mr. Riley write it in a report, and I asked him, are you sure this person said A, B, C, D, E, F, and G? He insisted. When it was over, after pressing him for about 3 or 4 hours, he finally confessed that, no, that person didn't say that, but that's what they meant.
Oh, gosh.
So
Okay.
it was this problem of, it's not what you're saying, it's what I want to hear.
Right.
So we had some other instances with him where this was a problem, and he was counseled about that. At that point in time, I told him, I don't have time for this.
All right.
And I said to him, Brian, if you can't straighten this up, I am personally going to recommend you for termination.
Right.
Because this kind of behavior and these kind of allegations cannot stand.
Right.
That's when he quit. He gives this whole other reason for quitting. It's absolutely false. He got mad and he took his toys home.
Right.
Here's what he does. About 3 or 4 months later, he tries to backdoor his way in, and he goes has a meeting with Sheriff Arpaio, asking for his badge back. Obviously, Sheriff contacts me. I'm like, Sheriff, you can do what you want to do with him, but he will never step foot in my doors. I said, as a matter of fact, if you want to put him here, that's your prerogative. You can let him run this and I'll quit.
Right.
I won't deal with him.
Right.
Subsequently, he never got a badge.
Right.
He got mad again, and now he's gone scorched earth against the sheriff.
Right. And this is the guy that Peter Boyles uses as an expert while trashing you and me.
Right, and this is a guy who, after that, was on the board of Wake Up America. I think it lasted about 4 months.
Right.
He was a precinct commander for the Republican Party. I think that lasted 3 months. I mean, where does this guy go? Does he fit in, or can he stay anywhere?
Right.
But the bigger problem is, you got fired from a non-paying police job.
Right.
And you're going to sit here and tell me, first off, you don't understand how the transfer of authority works?
Right.
You're going to understand that you don't have to be certified to perform law enforcement functions once you're given that authority? You're going to try to convince people that the only way you can do this is to be, quote, certified? He doesn't understand what it means. He doesn't understand the implications.
Right.
But then to conceal the fact that you were, at any point in time, conceal the fact that you were, tells you there's a bigger story. And there is a bigger story. I'm just going to hold that close to the vest until I need it.
Right, right. Okay. All right. Well, listen, we've only got 3 or 4 or 5 minutes left, so there's 2 things I want to address. So let's get the most important one first. People are going to want to hear from your mouth just some kind of little update on where you are and what's going on. And I know you're not going to name dates for conferences, but just tell people what you want them to know about the fluidity of this case and the fact that, you know, it's still going on. You haven't given up. It's bigger than ever, et cetera. You speak your words.
You know, Carl, this has morphed into something that no one ever expected. You have to think of it, a good friend of mine put it like this, it's like a locomotive pulling a caboose.
Yeah.
One is pulling the other. They are working in tandem, although they are separate, and I know that's hard to understand.
Right.
But they are. And every time we get close to something, we end up discovering something else, and it keeps to prolong this. We are hoping that we are getting close to finally putting a ribbon on it, but I don't know if that's going to happen. But, Carl, I want to say one thing. I don't even know if I'm going to have the time. We were accused on Peter Boyle's show of crying wolf.
Mm-hmm.
I want your audience to understand there were 3 separate occasions that we thought something big was going to happen.
Right.
And I'm going to tell you what they were. About 2 years ago, outgoing Congressman Joe Walsh pledged to us that he was going to take my information, he was going to go on the floor of Congress, of the House, and he was going to ask it to be entered into the congressional record and demand an investigation.
Right.
I worked feverishly. Joe Gilbert actually brought Walsh to us feverishly over Christmas. You could ask my wife. I didn't even see Christmas that year or New Year's, trying to get this thing done for this guy. And when it came time to do it, he didn't do it.
Right.
He gave up his seat and he walked away.
Right. You got 1
That
minute.
was the first time we thought something big was going to be. Then we had Steve Stockman. Steve Stockman, you and I met in CPAC. He said the same thing. Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. When it came time to do it, Steve Stockman went dark.
Right.
So those are 2 times that we believe something was going to happen.
Ed, don't forget Congressman Jeff Miller, who said...
Well, Jeff Miller was a whole other issue.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's make it 3 times. Any time we have told you something big was going to happen is because we truly believed it.
These
We
congressmen.
were counting on these people, and if they change direction, there's nothing we can do about that.
Right.
So I just want to let your audience know, it's by your graciousness that they're even hearing what's going on in this investigation.
Well, thank you.
We're trying to keep them informed. But if you want to run this game with us, if you want to run this race, You're going to have to be big boys and girls and roll with the punches that we have to roll with.
Right.
And you can't get mad if something changes because it is so fluid. And the bigger it gets, the more input other people contribute. And then you have to deal with personalities, agendas, and schedule.
Right. Right. Mike, we're out of time. We're out of time. I'm so sorry. Folks, listen, you've been listening to Freedom Friday. Mike Zula, we're going to have him back. We're going to talk more about this.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.